שלום לכולם, תודה רבה שהצטרפתם אלינו לפסטיבל הסופרים הבינלאומי במשכנות שנים. Thank you so much for being with us in this Jerusalem Writers Festival in משכנות שנים. האורחת הראשונה שלנו היום היא באמת יוצאת דופן ואנחנו שמחים מאוד על האירוח שלה כאן איתנו בפסטיבל. לין אולמן, שני ספרים ללין אולמן יצאו בעברית. הראשון הוא חסד, ספר שעוסק במוות, במחשבות על מוות, אולי גם בחרטה הקשורה למוות. הספר השני שיצא בעברית הוא הספר חסרי הנחת, כמובן הספר בו היא באה חשבון, מספרת על חייה עם אביה, הקולנוען הנודע אינגמר ברגמן, ולצידו כמובן האימא שלה, שחקנית נודעת לא פחות, ליב אולמן. אנחנו נקיים את השיחה הזו עם לין אולמן באנגלית, אנחנו שמחים על כך. לין אולמן, thank you so much.
Hello, and thank you very much for being with me. Welcome to Oslo.
And I would say, I would love to say welcome to Jerusalem, but coronavirus.
Yes, and this is the story of our life now. But it feels very strange, you know, to sit here with you. It's intimate. We are very close and we have almost the same bookcase. So it looks as if my bookcase just follows your bookcase the way I'm looking at it. So we look like there's something very intimate about being on Zoom.
How did you live the past year, the pandemic year?
Well, like most people, I've not seen many people except my family. Most of my meetings have been on Zoom. My contact with people are these squares. I was just looking at a series of photographs of Greta Garbo, and they were these very strict squares. And it looked 9 photographs of Garbo, and it looked as if she was, you know, that she was talking on Zoom with herself. And so my whole mind is almost, you know, in relating to other people are these squares. But, you know, it's been, everything was canceled, like for everybody, more than a year ago. And I found that when everything kind of broke, new things started to happen and new ways of doing things, new ways to write, new ways to eat. I started a podcast, you know, with authors from around the world, to talk about, you know, what now? How do we do, what do we do now? I think the world has changed forever, really.
But do you really think that people will learn something after this year? Because we forgive very easily, we forget very easily. You know, would we learn something from this year?
Well, you said we forgive very easily, and then you changed it to forget very easily. I think you're right. We do forget very easily, and maybe forgive enough. I don't know. And what are we supposed to learn? And what are we not to forget? And what should we remember? I don't know. I'm worried about the time ahead. The coronavirus has been a light on our communities. Has been a sharp, merciless light on many of the things that happen on a global community, in local community, in family communities, and problems that linger before have come out in the light. So I think it will take a long time to figure out what we have learned and where we are going after this.
Did it change you as a writer? Did it change you as a daughter, as a mother, as a grandmother?
Well, I didn't know what it was like to be a grandmother because before the coronavirus, I experienced becoming a grandmother just 2 months ago, which is different because I can't hold my grandchild every single day like I would like to. And probably can't do that before I have the vaccine. I think it has changed me as a writer, but I'm trying to figure that out because I'm working on a book, and the book is going to be out in Norway in the fall, and obviously things changed because where I stand, how I experience reality changes, language changes, how we communicate changes, where my brain changes. So the book obviously changed. And I think most writers now are wondering and thinking, how will this year change us and change us as writers? As a mother, probably a little more holding on. I have a daughter who lives at home with me. She's 17. And her whole 16th year was just, being at home. And I'm wondering, what is it like to spend your whole 16th year at home with your parents? Not to be out. And the sun is beautiful today in Oslo. She should be out dancing. Oh, it's changed. Has it changed for you?
Yeah, completely. At first, me as a loner, it was a big party. I don't need to hug anybody. I don't need to meet anybody. I don't need to go to coffee. I don't have to lie why I can't go to this party or this wedding. Everything is okay. But even me, after a year, I said to myself, okay, listen, I want to choose when to go out and not to go out. I don't want nature to choose for me.
I recognize that, and I do recognize that great relief. And I am, about not having to meet everybody for coffee. There's something very safety in not meeting someone. And I'm wondering how much of a loner am I actually? An introvert. I didn't realize I was such an introvert like you. So I think a lot of us are going to feel quite anxious about the reopening of the world. And it's a different kind of anxiety, the closing of the world, but anxious nevertheless. But anxiety is a part of my life, so I don't know if it is for you.
It is. It is. I want to talk, with your permission, about your podcast. His name is How to Proceed, which is a great name for the pandemic era. Why did you started it, and why did you choose to talk to authors?
Well, I started it because things I often do author conversations. Either as the author and somebody talks to me like now, or I'm the one who does your job. Usually I prefer doing your job, being the one asking the questions. So together with the Literature House in Oslo, I was talking to the artistic director there, whose name is also Lynn, by the way. And we were talking about everything that was canceled and how all the stages were closed down and how all the conversations that we had planned that we were going to do on stage and that we wanted to do were not going to happen. So we started thinking about, well, can we do it? Can we do these conversations as a podcast? And then we can invite anybody we want. We don't have to think about plane tickets, authors who are, booked 9 years in advance. We can just ask anybody we want. And we were so taken with our own wonderful idea of asking anyone we want that even death wasn't a problem for us when we started. So we said, we want Susan Sontag. She, illness is metaphor. How does she view the coronavirus? How does she view the pandemic? Well, besides the dead authors, who obviously then couldn't come, we invited some of the greatest authors in the world that we were curious about, like George Saunders, Joyce Carol Oates, Deborah Levy, Rachel Cusk, Anne Carson, just wonderful, wonderful writers from around the world. And everybody said yes, which was fantastic. So suddenly we had a year of interviews ahead of us. This was last year. And so it's been wonderful to work and having these voices, because we've been on the phone, we've recorded on the phone, not seeing faces. So just having these voices and delving into these incredible contemporary writers' minds from around the world.
And what did you learn? Was it a sort of sisterhood? I'm in trouble, you're in trouble, let's hug? Or did you really learn something about the world?
Oh, I love that. I didn't think of it as a sisterhood and I'm in trouble, you're in trouble. Maybe not let's hug, because I'm not a hugger like you, but maybe I'm in trouble, you're in trouble. What do we do now? I think that was a big deal. And that's why, the title, How to Proceed, because a lot of us authors, spend a lot of time thinking, well, how am I going to start a book? How am I going to begin? That's always super problematic for me. I never know how to begin. So I spend years, procrastinating. And then you think very early on, how am I going to end? How is this going to end? I usually know my ending. But now, both in my writing and in my life, I think much more about, how to proceed. I don't know. I wake up in the morning and I'm not sure what I'm going to do next or how I'm going to do it. So I have to think. I have to spend some time, talking down the panic to say, well, how to proceed. I will do this, and then I will do this. I will start by breathing, then I will get out of bed, and then I will probably, have some coffee, and I will go to my computer and work and hug my family. But I have to think through these things. But
I have to ask, you say talking down the panic. Doesn't it supposed to get easier as we grow up?
No. I'm older.
Don't say that.
I am probably older than you, and no, it doesn't. It doesn't get easier. I don't think so. I don't think it gets easier. And the writers I've talked to, I had a wonderful conversation with a beautiful American poet and essayist named Mary Ruffle. She's written extensively on fear. And she spoke very eloquently on fear. And she said it's still there, but she has made it part of her
existence.
Yes. The Buddhists say, invite fear for tea.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I haven't personally quite been able to do it. He spoke very eloquently about fear, as did George Saunders, as did a lot of the authors that I talked to. I guess because I ask a lot of questions about fear, because it's something that I think about a lot also.
I rather have fear for tea than death for check game. But can we talk about this fear, this small thing, the fear that the small thing that scroll down in our bodies and always in our life? What kind of fear is it?
Oh, the fear. That's what you meant. It was very lovely, the movement you did with your hands there. So it was almost like a little Pina Bausch moment. Who's one of my favorite choreographers. And who a lot of her work was also about fear and about overcoming fear. But what was your question? How?
What is this fear? Can you give an headline to this fear? Is it a fear as a woman? Is it a fear as a writer? Is it a fear as a daughter?
All those things? Well, there's always, but I think that the fear comes often with being a writer, because writing does not ask you to know what you're doing. I mean, good writing, unlike many other jobs. I mean, if you are a brain surgeon, you come into your job, you're not expected to be inspired. Nobody really cares if you're inspired or not. And you are expected to know what you are doing. When you come to your job as a writer, I think part of being a good writer, or part of writing, is actually not knowing what the hell excuse me first, what you're doing. There's a wonderful Norwegian novelist. I don't know if he's translated to Hebrew, but he's called Dag Solstad. He's one of our greatest poets. And he said, I always write the novels that I know that I'm not able to write. And with that, of course, comes a lot of fear. Because you sit there feeling like or experiencing, not only feeling, but experiencing that you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to do this. Kierkegaard talked a lot about this, about, that you have to be on the depth. You have to be on the depths to understand anything. I don't know the English translation for the quote that I'm thinking about. And, being out there on the depths, and not understanding exactly what you're doing, and trying and writing on intuition alone, and trusting that what you're doing is going somewhere. Because another thing with writing is you always write bad before it becomes good. I mean, very few sit down. Well, you know this, and every writer knows this. I mean, you sit down and you start, and it has to be bad before it's good. Very rarely do you sit down and it's immediately good. I mean, the art is in the editing always, and the rewriting.
But do you think that having two giants, not one, two giants as parents made this fear or the obligation to be great, made it even stronger for you than for other writers?
No. Because I see this fear, and it's not only something that belongs to writers. It's a kind of way of being vulnerable in the world. And I think to write or to do any kind of art, you have to be vulnerable in the world. That's the source where you write from, and that's going to bring with it fear.
Fear. You have to feel this emotion. But I want to ask about your conversation about with other writers. Do they also have this fear?
Some of the writers that I spoke to spoke very eloquently, directly about fear. Some spoke of anxiety. Some spoke of the difficulty of writing. Some spoke of the unquiet or disquiet of being a writer in our time and trying to be precise, because a good writer always wants to be precise, and when something is kind of not precise, that in itself creates a sense of well, in me, it creates fear when I write something and it's kind of just half true or half precise. And So most of the conversations in the podcast really is about what it is to write, what it is to read, why do they write, why do they read, why do they write as they do.
What do you read? What do you like reading?
And that's the question I always ask my writers first. What are you reading? Which is an homage to one of my favorite writers, Ali Smith. Because in one of her novels, Ali Smith is just a wondrous, wondrous writer. And she was the first writer I interviewed in the podcast. And in one of her books, the old man character always asks, it's in the seasonal quartet that she has written, always ask, what are you reading? So what am I reading? Right now, I'm reading Emmanuel Carrère.
Of course.
I'm reading his huge book called Like in Norwegian about the Bible text, about the apostles. I'm not sure about the English title, actually.
It was a huge success also here in Israel.
Was it a success? Yes.
Yeah.
It's an incredible book. The Kingdom, it's called in English, yes. And I'm also reading Tove Jansson, who is the Finnish writer who many people know, who created the Moomin.
Of course. We love her. Yeah.
But she also wrote several books, novels for adults. So I'm reading one of her novels for adults, and it's about two women who are both artists and living and working together, and arguing about life and work. A beautiful, beautiful book.
Do you feel sometimes envy? Do you envy other writers? You said to yourself, he writes so well, I hate him?
Do you?
Of course!
No, I don't. Well, no, but I am so enchanted by reading good writers that when a writer is really, really good, it almost feels like, because it touches my own creativity, and it feels almost like I've written something good myself, because but I do get the sense, I wish I could do that. I mean, I read Ali Smith or Anne Carson, who's another favorite, and I said, how does she do that? How does she do that? But that's also a kind of wonderful feeling, because it's there, it's possible, and that's kind of lovely feeling. So the hate comes in. Maybe the hate is more, he's not that good a writer, so why is he getting all this, credit and all these prizes and all these, wonderful, declarations of being a genius? That's where maybe the hate comes in, yes.
Prizes are important to you? Do you yearn them? Do you want to get them?
That's a really fun. Well, the prizes I've gotten are very, very good prizes, and I'm very proud of them. The prizes I haven't gotten or been nominated for, they don't really matter. Isn't that? And I don't care.
I'm holding chesed in Hebrew. In your language, I think it's nade.
Nodע.
Okay, I will never get it. But it's about death, and it's not your only book about death. Why such a young person writes so much about death?
Well, all my books are about death. Most books are about death. This one particular book is about a man with a terminal illness who wants his beloved wife to help him die when the time is right. And she says, no, she's a doctor, so she doesn't want to do this. And then she doesn't want to do it. And then she don't want to do it. But then in the middle of the book, she says to him, well, all right, I will help you when the time is right. And then he sees something that he wonders if it's relief in his face, in her face. And he wonders if that's really the kind of promise that he wanted, if that was the kind of help he wanted. So when I wrote that book, it was more for me a love story than it was a story about death, really. I mean, I imagine these two people dancing first to the one side and then to the other side, because then the rest of the book is really that he is doubting, but she has given a promise, and she is someone who never, ever breaks a promise. And to him, this becomes frightening. So their whole way of talking, it's really about language and the language we have as lovers or as married people when we've been married for a long time, and when this breaks down, this language.
So for you, it's talking about life through death.
Well, yes, I guess talking about life through a story about death. But to me, really, I never thought about Nodda or grace, as it is called in English, as a book about death. I thought about it as, a book about love and the language of love.
Do you love love?
Huh? No, I don't know. I have to think about that question. I don't know if I love love. Can you love love? Do you?
I do.
Well, that was lovely. You had a lovely smile when you said that. So, I don't know. When I get a question like that, I mean, I want to say, well, of course, yes. But I don't know. I don't know what the question means. Probably I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have an answer, and I'll call you and say whether I do or not, or what I think that question means.
I will be waiting for your call. I will be waiting. And the second book that was translated to Hebrew is חסרי, הנחת. In your language, it's the urolig.
That's pretty good.
Yeah?
Die urolige. Yes.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, it's about your life, about your parents' life. Are you annoyed when people are talking about your parents? Are you annoyed by conversation, speaking and asking about how is it to live with Ingemar Bergman? How is it to live with Liv Ullmann?
Well, not annoyed. When I wrote Unquiet, as it is called in English, in the Urulia, it was really a book I wanted to write about family and the stories that are told within a family. And I wanted to use my own family. And I did like I always do. I mean, I take a little here and I take there, and and you blend fiction and memoir and it was, of course, it was a kind of conversation with my parents also, just like my father. So many of his films and also his books are conversations with his parents. And I think that we all have these conversations with our parents, either in our heads or we write them down, or we actually do have them with our parents. Our parents follow us through our whole lives. So it's not really a book about, my parents. It's a book about parenthood, childhood, about growing old, about love and different forms of love and trying to love and not being able to love in the way that you want to. and about memory, because the book started as something much more almost journalistic and biographical, that when my father was very, very old, he wanted to write a book about growing old. I mean, really old, not just aging. I mean, he was in his mid-80s when he started talking about this book about growing old, because he noticed he was losing some language. He was forgetting about certain things. And he wanted to write about that because that's what he did his whole life. He experienced something and he wanted to write about it or to make something of it, a film or a book, or put it in a play. But part of becoming old was really that he didn't have the energy to write. So I said, or he said, I don't remember who said, let's do a book together. I'll interview you. And then we got so excited, both of us, about this wonderful idea that we were going to write this book together and that we would be having these conversations, that we did what every writer does when you get an idea. You procrastinate. You don't do it because you're so excited about the idea that you talk about how you're going to do it. So we spent the next 4 years maybe talking about how we were going to do the book, about when we were going to talk about him growing old. When were we going to meet and how were we going to meet, and were we going to use a tape recorder? And he didn't trust my technical capabilities when it came to a tape recorder. He was very wary of sound problems. And so was I. So we talked about all these things. So when I finally did come with my tape recorder, he was actually so old and was then so ill, and his memory was so impaired that everything that he had sensed was happening had actually happened. And when we met, things were, day was night, night was day, dream was reality, and reality was dream. I was maybe his daughter. I could also be somebody else. What happened a minute ago, he could maybe not remember, but he remembered what happened 40 years ago. So the conversation became it was a very, very different conversation, or the many conversations we had. And at the time, and I felt it was a great failure. And I knew that my father was dying, and these conversations took place a couple of months before he died. And I felt that I had failed, and I felt, I was very angry with myself, because for so long we had planned, or I had planned, finally I'm going to sit down with my father and I'm going to ask all the questions that I want to ask him. And of course, those conversations never happened. Instead, we had these very strange, almost Beckett-like conversations, where sometimes he was beautifully eloquent talking about Mozart and exquisitely confused about who was whose mother of the women that he had been married. At the time, I just thought, this is a fiasco. I was very sad. I was ashamed of myself that I hadn't done the interviews before. So many years later, I started writing Unquiet, this book, and I didn't even want to look at the tapes. I didn't want to listen to them because the sound quality was so bad, and we were both so stumbling. He was his memory loss, and I was, almost shouting to him. And I didn't want to hear the tapes. They just made me feel ashamed. But in the middle of the book, I started hearing them, and I heard something different than what I thought. I heard two people who really tried to have conversations, not the conversations that they had planned, that they had meticulously planned, but conversations that happened now that everything was broken. These conversations were completely broken. And the whole book is really about brokenness. Broken families, broken love, broken conversations, broken big dreams. But in a kind of, when I wrote it, I thought, well, I'll do it as a New Orleans funeral march, you know? These are happy, joyous, broken marches, not somber, and, you know, it's more Fellini than Bergman. So 8.5 was more of an inspiration to me writing this book than maybe any of my father's films.
But you could been more Bergman. You could be more cruel. Why were you so gentle? You could, you could write the big interview of, the Prince Harry with Oprah Winfrey, to break everything.
To me, this book also, when we talked about the other book, I mean, it was more of a love story. It was more, love and there's just so much more to write about, when there's gentleness, really, and then when there's cruelty or anger. I'm not saying that anger is not a good, anger can be good for writing. And there's some rage too. But I find that gentleness is maybe a little bit underestimated as a resource for writing, as a fuel for writing. Because gentleness is is quite complicated. You have to use a bigger picture, maybe, if it's just cruelty.
If it's only a cruelty. I don't know why I asked this question.
I don't know either, but it was an interesting question.
I want to ask you now, in my gut, I want to ask you, do you forgive your father? Which I don't even know if you have something to forgive him about, but do you forgive him?
Oh, it's the second time in our interview you used the word forgive. I don't have anything to forgive or not to forgive. It's not that kind of book. Do you have someone in your life that you don't forgive?
Yes.
Your father?
Yes.
That's why you asked the question, probably.
Of course, but my father is not Ingmar Bergman.
But it doesn't make a difference. The fact that my father and, the parent, the mother and the father and the girl who is, are not named. And this idea of not naming is very important, because I didn't want to write a book about famous people. It wasn't interesting to me, and it was much more interesting to me and much more challenging, really, to go beyond a story about a family.
I think this is something that we cannot really understand, or we cannot really relate, because for us, you are the daughter of, but for yourself, you are just a daughter.
Yes. I don't know who you mean by us. I mean, I'm obviously much more, and I think that we are everything. I mean, that's a starting point. We are the children of. But then, there's every single day and the thousands and thousands of days where we are everything other. We are, friends, lovers, mothers, grandparents. I've just become writers, artists.
Can you say to yourself, or can you tell us, what is your hierarchy? What are you the most? Are you first of all a writer? Are you first of all a wife? Are you first of all a mother?
What are you first of all?
Wow, that's a very difficult question, which I ask myself every day. I think first of all, I'm a husband.
Ah.
Yes.
Well, your spouse will be happy with that, I'm sure.
Maybe.
I don't know if there's a hierarchy. It's a difficult question, as you say. Maybe mother? But I am all those things that you just said. And really, it's that, balance that I never quite am able to manage. I think women ask this question more often than men. I don't know if you would ask it. Would you have asked it of a male author?
I don't know. Since I'm a gay man, I think that my answer will be more close to your answer than to straight men that they are watching us now.
Probably, absolutely, yeah. Because my impression is that a woman writer, that might also go for a gay writer, you are also a writer.
Yeah.
So if you are anything but a straight white male, you will get these.
Of course, of course. I want to end our conversation, with your permission, with a small story. You told me before we started this session that the last time you've been to Israel, to Jerusalem, was when you were 18.
Yes. Yes, I told you, because you asked me if I had been to Jerusalem. And I told you that I was there when I was 18, and I was there with a boy. But it was very, very sad. Because we knew that when we both went to New York, and we went on this trip, and it was so obviously on this trip that we were ending. We didn't end it in Jerusalem, but I remember it was 7 days sadness. It certainly wasn't Jerusalem's fault. And I haven't thought about it at all for decades until you asked me today. Just
so we have
on the streets, being sad with somebody that you love, and that was maybe the first time, that sense of walking in a strange place, being sad, knowing that something's over.
We have to make you new good memories of Jerusalem. We hope to see you here when it can happen. I want to thank you so much for this conversation. לין אולמן, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
ואתם, תודה רבה שהייתם איתנו. כמובן פסטיבל הסופרים הבינלאומי במשכנות שאננים בירושלים. We want to thank also the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything.